Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
What is the story of today?
Well, today we will complete Abraham's story. Alayhi salam.
MashaAllah.
So, let us begin.
His father's harsh treatment did not stop Abraham from delivering the message of truth. Angry and sad to see people prostrate before idols, he was determined to stamp out these practices and went to the town to debate with the people, knowing full well that he might suffer harm. Like a wise doctor searching for the cause of a sickness so as to prescribe the proper cure, or like a judge who questions the accused sharply so that he might detect the truth. Abraham asked them, "Do the idols see you when you prostrate before them? Do they benefit you in any way?" They quickly tried to defend their beliefs. They argued that they knew their idols were lifeless but that their forefathers had worshipped them. To them this was proof enough for their belief. Abraham explained that their forefathers had been wrong. This angered them and they retorted, "Are you condemning our gods and our forefathers? Or are you just joking?" Abraham showed no fear as he replied, "I am serious. I come to you with a true religion. I have been sent with guidance from our Lord who alone is worthy of worship, who is the creator of the heavens and the earth, and who regulates all affairs of life. Unlike the dumb idols which are just stone and wood." To convince them that the idols could not harm him, he challenged, "I have already condemned them. If they had any power they would have harmed me by now."
What happened later?
He explained to them the beauty of Allah's creation, His power and wisdom. Idol worship is detested by Allah, for Allah is the Lord of the universe who created mankind, guided him, provided him with food and drink, and cured him when he was sick, and who will cause him to die and be raised up again. It was He to whom Abraham prayed and who would forgive his sins on the day of judgment. However, they would not give up but clung fast to idolatry. Abraham left his father's house and abandoned his people and what they worshipped. He decided to do something about their state of disbelief, but did not reveal it. He knew that there was going to be a great celebration on the other bank of the river, which would be attended by all the people. Abraham waited until the city was empty, then came out cautiously, directing his steps towards the temple. The streets leading to it were empty and the temple itself was deserted, for the priests had also gone to the festival outside the city. Abraham went there carrying a sharp axe. He looked at the stone and wood statues of the gods and at the food laid in front of them as offerings. He approached one of the statues and asked, "The food in front of you is getting cold. Why don't you eat?" The statue kept silent and rigid. Abraham asked the other statues around him, "Will you not eat of the offering before you?" He was mocking them for he knew they would not eat. He once again asked then, "What is the matter with you that you do speak not?" He then raised his axe and started smashing the false gods worshipped by the people. He destroyed them all except one, on whose neck he hung the axe. After this his anger subsided and he felt at peace. He left the temple. He had fulfilled his vow to show his people a practical proof of their foolishness in worshipping something other than Allah. When the people returned, they were shocked to see their gods smashed to pieces, lying scattered all over the temple. They began to guess who had done that to their idols, and Abraham's name came to their minds. Allah the Almighty said, they said, "Who has done this to our Aliyah, gods? He must indeed be one of the wrongdoers." They said, "We heard a young man talking against them who is called Abraham." They said, "Then bring him before the eyes of the people, that they may testify." They said, "Are you the one who has done this to our gods, O Abraham?" Abraham said, "Nay, this one, the biggest of them, idols, did it. Ask them, if they can speak." So they turned to themselves and said, "Verily, you are the Zalimun, polytheists and wrongdoers." Then they turned to themselves, their first thought, and said, "Indeed you, Abraham, know well that these idols speak not." Abraham said, "Do you then worship besides Allah things that can neither profit you nor harm you? Fie upon you, and upon that which you worship besides Allah. Have you then no sense?" Furious, they demanded that Abraham be arrested and tried. Abraham did not resist. This was precisely what he had been aiming for, so that he could show them up in public for their foolish beliefs. At the trial they asked him if he was responsible for breaking the idols. Smiling, he told them to ask the biggest idol, which was still whole. He told them that he must be the culprit. They replied that he knew well that the idol could not speak or move, which gave Abraham the chance to prove the foolishness of worshipping these lifeless objects. They then realized the senselessness of their beliefs. However, their arrogance would not allow them to admit their foolishness. All they could do was use their power of authority, as tyrants usually do, to punish Abraham. They kept him in chains and planned their revenge. Anger was burning in their hearts. They decided to throw Abraham into the biggest fire they could build. All the citizens were ordered to gather wood as a service to their gods. Ignorant, sick women vowed that if they were cured they would donate so much wood to burn Abraham. For several days they collected fuel. They dug a deep pit, filled it with firewood and ignited it. They brought a catapult with which to cast Abraham into the fire. Abraham was put on the catapult, his hands and feet tied. The fire was ready with its flames reaching the sky. The people stood away from the pit because of the great heat. Then the chief priest gave his order to cast Abraham into the fire. The angel Gabriel came near Abraham's head and asked him, "O Abraham, do you wish for anything?" Abraham replied, "Nothing from you." The catapult was shot, and Abraham was cast into the fire, but his descent into the blaze was as a descent on steps in a cool garden. The flames were still there, but they did not burn, for Allah the Almighty had issued his command. "O fire, be you coolness and safety for Abraham." The fire submitted to the will of Allah, becoming cool and safe for Abraham. It only burned his bonds, and he sat in the midst of the fire as if he were sitting in a garden. He glorified and praised Allah the Almighty. With a heart that contained only his love for Allah. There was not any vacant space therein for fear, or worry. It was filled with love only. Fear and awe were dead, and the fire was turned into coolness, making the air pleasant. Those who love Allah as Abraham did do not fear. Almighty Allah declared, those, i.e., believers, unto whom the people, hypocrites, said, "Verily, the people, pagans, have gathered against you, a great army, therefore, fear them." But it, only, increased them in faith, and they said, "Allah, alone, is sufficient for us, and He is the best disposer of affairs, for us." So they returned with grace and bounty from Allah. No harm touched them, and they followed the good pleasure of Allah. And Allah is the owner of great bounty. It is only Satan that suggests to you the fear of his awliya supporters and friends, polytheists, disbelievers in the oneness of Allah and in His Messenger Muhammad, so fear them not, but fear me, if you are true believers. The throng, the chiefs, and the priests sat watching the fire from a distance. It was burning their faces and nearly suffocating them. It kept burning for such a long time that the disbelievers thought it would never be extinguished. When it did burn out, they were greatly amazed to find Abraham coming out of the pit untouched by the fire. Their faces were black from the smoke, but his was bright with the light and grace of Allah. The raging fire had become cool for Abraham and had only charred the ropes which held him. He walked out of the fire as if he were walking out of a garden. Cries of astonishment were heard from the heathens. They wanted to harm him, but we made them the worst losers. This miracle shamed the tyrants, but it did not cool the flame of anger in their hearts. However, after this event many of the people followed Abraham, although some kept their belief a secret for fear of harm or death at the hands of the rulers. Abraham had established a definite reasoning against idolaters. Nothing was left for him except to reason against the people who proclaimed themselves gods. When the king, Namrud, heard of Abraham's safe exit from the fire, he became very angry. He feared that the status of godhead he had proclaimed for himself was now challenged by an ordinary human being. He summoned Abraham to the palace and held a dialogue with him, which Allah the Almighty recounted. "Have you not thought about him who disputed with Abraham about his Lord, Allah, because Allah had given him the kingdom? When Abraham said to him, 'My Lord, Allah, Is he who gives life and causes death? He said, I give life and cause death. Abraham said, Verily, Allah causes the sun to rise from the east, then cause it to rise from the west. So the disbeliever was utterly defeated. And Allah guides not the people who are zalimin, wrongdoers, etc. Abraham lived on earth worshipping Allah and calling people to monotheism, but he was journeying to Allah, knowing that his days on earth were limited and that they would be followed by death, and finally, resurrection. The knowledge of life after death filled Abraham with peace, love, and certitude. One day, he begged Allah to show him how he brought the dead back to life. Allah commanded Abraham to take 4 birds, cut them up, mingle their body parts, divide them into 4 portions, and place them on top of 4 different hills. Then call back the birds in Allah's name. Abraham did as he was told. Immediately the mingled parts of the birds separated to join their original bodies in different places, and the birds flew back to Abraham. Almighty Allah revealed, and, remember, when Abraham said, My Lord, show me how you give life to the dead. Allah said, Do you not believe? Abraham said, Yes, I believe, but to be stronger in faith. He said, Take 4 birds, then cause them to incline towards you, then slaughter them, cut them into pieces, and then put a portion of them on every hill, and call them, they will come to you in haste. And know that Allah is Almighty, All-Wise. And that was the story of Abraham alayhi salam. Subscribe.